My understanding is that you arrived in Thailand in September 1972, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's obviously very, very late in the
Oh,
war.
yeah, we thought it was over.
So what do you mean by that? Like over just in the literal sense that the war was winding down?
Yeah,
Over
yeah,
in
the
the
whole
sense,
thing, all of it. That's what we thought. But in April of that year, the North started moving toward the South, and it was bad. And so they kept the war going. January 23rd came, Vietnam stopped, and we thought we're going home. We all went out and drank. That night, the skipper comes in and says, "Nope, tomorrow we're going to Laos and Cambodia, but not Vietnam."
so
So
January
from January 23rd till August
73
14th, we continued flying combat.
over Laos and Cambodia?
Yes,
So let me pull this apart then. So September 72 through January 73, where did you, over what area did you usually fly? Was it over North Vietnam, over Laos, over both?
no, all three countries, sometimes over the North in Vietnam, but Laos and Cambodia as well.
In 1972 also.
Yes,
And then come 73, it's only Laos and Cambodia.
correct.
Now, so in 72, I'm assuming that the sources are overwhelmingly, if not completely, North Vietnamese. Is that right?
Uh, Overwhelmingly, yes, but not totally, because there were bad guys in Laos, what they Pathet Lao,
Pathet Lao, yeah.
and there was turbulence going on in Cambodia. The Prime Minister Pol Pot was about to be outed.
Now in 70, from January to August 73, when you're still flying missions over Laos and Cambodia, are there still North Vietnamese forces involved?
Oh, absolutely! They came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they went west into Laos and then Cambodia. Yeah,
Well, so in a sense then, we say combat troops are out of Vietnam in 73,
yes,
and your missions transition from, you're no longer flying missions over Vietnam, but you're still fighting the North Vietnamese
correct,
in Laos and Cambodia.
correct.
I want to back up. So this is obviously very, very late in the war. And one of the things you say in what you've written is that by the early 70s, a lot of people had grown
Oh
exhausted
yeah,
from of the war. I mean, even people who in 66, 67 had been very supportive, they'd grown exhausted by it. But you say that you wanted to get into it.
yes.
What was that just a young man being a young man? Was it partly anti-communist ideology? What was it that made you want to get into this conflict when most of the country had turned against it?
The reason I went into the Marine Corps, I didn't want. They were still drafting people, Preston, and I did not want to be drafted. And I went over to when the people came by recruiting. I went by at Baylor. I went by and I saw the Air Force, and I said I was in ROTC, blah blah blah. What'd you major in? I said English. They said no, you can't fly, not in the Air Force. Try the Navy. So I went to the Navy, right next door to them at the table. Same thing. No, we prefer uh, hard science degrees. Well, right next to them was the U.S. Marine Corps. I looked at the guy. He said, "Come over here." He signed me up right there to go to OCS, to come back in, to take the exam that Saturday. I blew the top out of it because I grew up around airplanes. So I became a Marine.
Wow. And what year is this?
This was 1969.
Okay. So so this is 1969. So you go into the Corps in 69 and then begin the process of training. Between, 69 when you go into the Marine Corps, and 72 when you arrive in Thailand, knowing
Yeah.
that you're going to be flying combat missions. Um, the country, as you say in what you've written, the country does substantially either turn against or just get, some people just are exhausted now of the
Yes.
situation in Vietnam. But you had been trained to, to fly the F-4 as a radar intercept officer. And it seems like, unlike most of the country, which had become exhausted by this conflict, it seems like you were actually wanting to go. Is that right?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. Back up. I was a Boy Scout, never made it to Eagle. And my dad had served all of World War II. He went in 6 months before it started. 3 months before it started, he got out 6 months after it was over. So, and all my, not all of them, but a majority of my family had served in the military going all the way back to the Civil War.
So there was
So,
a there was a
sorry,
sense of there was a sense in your family of just, your country's in a conflict and you have a duty.
absolutely correct. It all revolved around duty.
Hmm. Suppose before you go out on your first mission, your first combat flight, let's say the evening before your first combat mission,
Yeah,
you and another officer are sitting there, and the other officer asks you, "What are we doing here? What is this all about? Why are we in Thailand in 1972 flying missions over North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia?" What do you suppose you would have responded at that time?
Preston, we were all first lieutenants, and I flew my first combat hop with my hooch mates, the guys I lived with, and we were way below uh, having those kind of thoughts. We were doing it because we were Marines and we were given a mission, and that was all we were doing. We were following orders. That's basically what everybody over there, regardless of their feelings about the war as it unfolded, uh, we were doing our job. We were commissioned. We knew how to follow orders, etc.
So you were a radar intercept officer on F-4 Phantoms. What did that job involve?
That involved navigating, doing, helping the pilot run, navigate, which was all with maps. We didn't have any of the fancy stuff. Most of the communications, I did all the comm on the air so the pilot could concentrate on flying. And when later on, when I got salty, and they put me with the brand new guys, I did on one hop, I actually sung to this guy because he was so shook up. He was nervous as a whore in church. Sorry.
So the pilot was as nervous as a whore in church, and you said you started singing to him.
Yeah, get along, little doggies. Keep going.
What was the? So we have you have to tell me the story. What was going on? What was the context of this?
On that hop,
Yeah, when you start singing to the pilot.
this guy was a brand new guy. This was his first combat hop. And we were going into Laos, and Laos was a lot worse than Cambodia. And he just was, everybody on their first hop, Preston, everybody, including me, were nervous. I won't use that metaphor again, but we were nervous, not because we were afraid of getting killed or hit. We
Mm,
just didn't want to screw it up.
mm.
So we finally get down. This guy finally finds a target. We ran the whole thing. I told him to pickle and then pull because we were bombing. We were going uphill. The target was about halfway up the hill. So he had to string them out, walk the bombs up, and he missed completely. He blew the top off the hill, and the rest of them went down the backside. We only dropped 5 bombs. So I said, okay, we're going to come back around and do it again. Now, listen to me and just shut the F up and do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. And I gave him the corrections. Lower the airplane, push the throttles up. Let's go. Do you have the target in the reticle? Yes. Okay. 3, 2, 1, pickle, pull. He got 2 of the last 5 on the target. So he felt like it was a success. And I felt like I had survived another new guy.
What does that term mean, pickle?
That means hit the button and get the bobs off the airplane.
Let's see.
Pull the trigger, the bob trigger, pickle, get rid of them.
One of the questions that comes to my mind as I'm listening to you, you're in the back, and
Yes.
so you're not controlling the plane.
Not then, no.
Now, on a number of occasions, your plane comes under fire and your plane is hit.
Yeah.
Did you feel in those moments that you wished you were? What I'm getting at is really the kind of the psychology of that. Do you think it was um, that not having control of the plane, just sort of basically going along for the ride
No,
as this plane is being hit?
no,
Is that harder psychologically for you?
no, it wasn't hard at all because I learned that I knew as much as the guys in the front. I had been on more hops. When I was mission commander and even before that, I was in control of the whole flight and the airplane. And the pilot had to do what I told him to do. And I would say at least 50% of the time, when I would tell him to do something different, to swerve or jink or something, and we'd watch the rounds go by, he'd go, God, I didn't even see him. I said, it's my job to see him. It's your job to get away from him. No, I never felt like I was out of control. No,
Um,
I was the boss.
yeah.
Especially when I was a mission commander. When I had my super commanding officer, the colonel who was in charge of our group, he damn near killed us. To his credit, he told me before we went up, because I was the salty Rio then. He said, Fleet, I haven't done any tanking in a long time. And he said, I'm not very good. He says, I can bomb okay. Well, Preston, all our hops, we always went to the tanker first because who knows where we were going.
To refuel in the air.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was not, I thought he was just, humoring me and being a nice guy. He was telling the truth. He didn't know how to tank. He couldn't take, he damn near killed us. And we survived and got back and everything was fine. And that's,
You walked him through it. You
oh
walked
yeah.
him through it.
No, I cursed at him, which really bothered me.
Because he was a senior officer.
He was a full colonel and I was a first lieutenant.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was the commanding officer of the whole MAG, the Marine Air Group, A6 squadron, 2 F-4 squadrons, tankers, helicopters, etc.
Did you after this incident, did you keep that to yourself or did you tell other
On the tanker, the one on the tanker, I didn't have to do anything. The colonel told me, he says, go to the club. I'm going to buy you a drink. You saved our ass. He told everybody what had happened because everybody knew he hadn't flown in quite a while. Nobody knew he was terrible on the tanker. He was a good bomber. We had good BDA because he could fly that airplane, except for tanking.
What is BDA?
Bomb damage assessment.
I see.
That's the report card you get from the FAC when you come off the target.
From the forward air controller. Yeah.
Yeah, forward air controller.
So the forward air controller sort of, says, here's the target.
Yes.
Gets you there, and then afterwards reports on what happened.
Yes. And helps you during the hops.
Pardon my ignorance, this is a general question I don't know, but if flak is coming up and the pilot is hit, did you have the capacity as the radar intercept officer to actually to take control of the plane?
Not in that airplane because they had taken all the two sticks out and I was a backseater. I had to fly a hop when I was in training, do one takeoff and one landing because they still had the old two stick airplanes. All I could do once I was in we were flying the F-4B then, was I had command eject. I had a switch in the back seat, and we would always agree you want single eject or command eject. Every pilot I ever flew with, we flew on command eject. Thank God I never had to punch out or punch anybody out.
Well, that gets to a question I had then. You mentioned in what you've written pilots who were lost in the war and never found, so still listed as missing in action. In the 80s and 90s, of course, there was a big movement related to wanting to find the missing, the belief that maybe some of these missing airmen, uh,
Yes,
Marine pilots, were still being held captive. And when we
yes,
speak of those POWs from the Vietnam War, we do think primarily, I think, of pilots and those who were, in these planes, the radar intercept officers, etc. Was that something that just kind of weighed on you, the possibility of becoming a POW, the possibility of just going missing and never being found?
yes. I was aware of it, but none of us thought about it. We would, if you started talking about it, that was not de rigueur. You just shut up, had your next beer. But Preston, my squadron didn't lose one airplane. We almost did. But the A6s got hammered bad because they flew at night and they flew far up north. The other squadron next door to us, the F-4 squadron, did not have the kind of commanding officer we did. And they lost 3 airplanes while I was there because they didn't have good leadership.
So you're saying that, obviously especially this late, you're very well aware of prisoners of war. You're well aware that, pilots, radar intercept officers, others have punched out and were never found. You're very well aware of that. But the pilots, the other air officers, it's not a topic that comes up for conversation. Everybody knows
No,
about it, but you don't
never,
talk about it.
never. We didn't talk about it then. What we would do, we'd go right to the situation. I was in on one of them where a plane got hit. The pilot got out. They never got the Rio, a guy named Don Brewer. But we got the call. We were near there, and they said, okay, motion down. That was a 232 airplane. All available air, proceed to Umptium to try and put some fire down to keep the bad guys off of him. And we did. And that is about all that we did. And then, of course, we followed his what had happened to him. He made it back okay. On the other hand, I knew personally 2 guys that were shot down and captured, spent time at Ho Lao, and survived the war, made it back after it was over.
What did the war look like from the air? And so I would just kind of want to put together a scenario. Of course, you've read books, you've talked to other veterans, you've seen documentaries, you have a sense of the Vietnam War. But if
Yeah.
we isolate the Vietnam War as you saw it from the air, from that very specific perspective, what did the Vietnam War look like to you from the air?
Okay. First of all, let me qualify it. I was not and never pretended to be in what was called the shit, like 68, 66 through 68. So I knew I had a kind of an antiseptic view of it until I saw an airplane get hit and go down. And then it became more real. But none of us, what we worked for, what guided us over there was we were there to help the guys on the ground. Now, we never got to help Marines. We probably helped the Army and the friendlies on the other side, but we were there as a supporting arm. And it, from the air until you saw a SAM coming at you, or you saw the contrails of one of them, was nothing like the war on the ground. And then I know you're wondering this, because this is about the first thing my son asked me. He says, "Were you scared?" Damn right I was scared when I saw the contrails of a SAM-2, and it was fortunately a long way from us, but sure you were scared. But what it did was it increased your awareness. We were trained to fight down fear, let it motivate you to do something, and then react. And that's what we did. We didn't know where we were going until we took off, tanked, and went to the FAC. We knew the general area, route package 1, 2, 3 through 6. Downtown was Hanoi. I only hit Hanoi one time. I hit around Hanoi a lot, but we never knew where we were going or what the target was until we got the brief from the FAC. And it covered, you name it, we hit it. The least favorite was doing road traffic at night up near Vietnam, because no one liked to fly at night. And the armament was the AAA, anti-aircraft artillery, was thick down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So we didn't want to do that. But otherwise, we would hit whatever the FAC said. And it ran the gamut from blowing sampans out of the water, to hitting an old bridge, to troops in the open, troops in contact, it was called. You name it, we hit it. What we wanted to go after were the big guns, like the 85 millimeters. That's mostly what we were after, and truck parks along the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Were you aware at the time that there had been operations, I mean, consistent operations against the Ho Chi Minh Trail since, I mean, at least 1964?
Yes.
So, let me set up a scenario then. The officer, you're just talking with an officer over a beer, and he says to you, in one way or another, we've been hitting the Ho Chi Minh Trail since 64. It's 1973, late 1972, and the trail is still open. I mean, how do you explain that? So what's your explanation for how is it that despite everything that's been brought to bear against this series of trails that we call the Ho Chi Minh Trail, that in 72, 73, the thing is still functioning?
Okay, one thing that those guys were really good at, the North, if they started getting hit in a hot spot, they'd move the trail maybe 30 up to 30 miles east or west and try and put it into heavy jungle. Okay. The other part was, and this was an opinion shared by a lot of people to this day over beers and whatever. And it kind of segs into the other question. And that is, that war from the White House on down was mismanaged. It is almost like the powers that were then, starting with Kennedy up through LBJ and then Kissinger and Nixon, they really did not want to. I'm not sure they even knew how, because LBJ had McNamara working for him, and he was a disaster. It was just mismanagement and lack of will from this government, my government, as to whether we could win it or not. Could we have won it? Oh, hell yes, we could have won it. Okay, but that leads me to my last statement. And I want to make sure you get this. Yes, we lost the war, but guess what? We won the peace. And I was witness to that on two separate trips to Vietnam.
You mean in later years?
Yes, oh yeah, months later, 1997 and 2003.
What do you mean by that, that we won the peace?
Okay, first time I went back over there on business, I got hassled. They had a dossier on me. They had a dossier on everybody that's legit against them. And I got hassled. I was working for Volvo at the time. I
Yeah.
had a giveaway Swiss Army knife with Volvo on it. That was confiscated because it was a dangerous weapon. They held me in check until I missed my flight connection for the once a week flight from Vietnam back to the world. Called my secretary. She got me rescheduled. Okay, that was trip one. Trip two, when I went back in 2003, was a complete paradigm shift. We were now their best friends. And I did actual commercial aviation business over there. That was my job and my civilian job. And the paradigm had shifted around 100%. And the lady that I spoke to that almost caused me to cry, she put it in context for me. I told her I had been there. I had bombed 25 miles from where we were sitting in downtown Hanoi. That's when I asked her about her parents and told her I was glad we didn't kill them. She was born the day before I flew that hop. I went back and checked my logbooks and I started to tear up. And she put her arm on my shoulder, which was unusual for the Vietnamese. They're not tactile people, not with Americans. She looked at me and she said, "You don't need to feel bad about that. That was your government and my government." And that solved a whole lot of stuff for me.
I want to ask you that because you have this exchange with this young woman in North Vietnam, and you say to her, I'm glad I didn't kill your parents, right?
Yes.
As you're flying these bombing missions. And so I understand the literal meaning of what you're saying. What was what was the deeper point that you were making to yourself? If not to her, I mean, what was the deeper point that was underneath what you said there?
I basically, thinking about it, I wanted forgiveness because, Preston, I know I killed a lot of people that didn't deserve to die. Yeah, that's war. Okay, that's fine until it's me that did it. Then it becomes very real, very personable. I was looking for a way back to get back to whatever. I wanted myself to forgive myself and then go on. I think that's the deepest underlying reason.
So you stay in the Marine Corps and you retire as a colonel in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
I'm wondering at what point did the thoughts that you just expressed, when did those thoughts begin to really come into your mind? Was it fairly early? Was it after you got out of the Marine Corps? When did those thoughts begin to form in your mind?
Those thoughts came into my mind immediately when I got back in 1973. And I thought about what I had done and how at times I even felt very good about it and enjoyed it. I'll even say that. When you hit a hard target and take it out, that gives you a feeling almost indescribable. And I thought, there's something not right here. You killed a lot of innocent people. You also conducted a war. And that was immediate when I got back. And when I got back, nobody, not even the guys I was stationed with, would talk much about what they had done.
So what you described, the burden that combat veterans, often talk about. I mean, you described what I've heard so many times. You say on the one hand, you hit that hard target, and there's something pretty awesome about that. There's something that feels really great about that. Um, but there's the other side that, human beings were down there, and as you
Yes,
and in your assessment, some of them did not deserve what they received. And this is the terrible world of war. To what extent, as you continue in your Marine Corps career as a active duty for a while, and then as a reserve officer, retiring as a colonel, to what extent did that play into your discussions with younger officers as you're working with them, as you're mentoring them, as you're preparing them for the next conflict? Did your experience flying these missions out of Thailand over Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, did that come up a lot in your discussions with younger officers as you're mentoring them and training them?
yes, it did. And this is hard to explain and hard to understand for civilians, I think. But once you get the ribbons that tell everybody that can read ribbons that you've been there, then you're kind of special. And they want to know what you did, where you were, blah, blah, blah. And some would talk about the psychological aspect of it. I said, you have to be ready to knowingly kill people, okay? Because you're going to have to live with it. So you do whatever your religion tells you to do or your conscience tells you to do, but get ready because that's coming. Because I know you and you're a thoughtful, caring person. On the other hand, you're going to go out and become somebody's worst nightmare. You run the risk of that. And oddly enough, two guys that I was in the reserves with, we never got to go to Afghanistan or anywhere else over there, even though I volunteered my unit to go. They wanted to go. A couple of them went over that I knew, regular Marines, came back and said, I thought about what you said when you were teaching me. And he said, yeah.
You flew 131 combat missions. I imagine a lot of those have just kind of melded into, they're hard to pull apart. But I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share memories you have of a couple of those 131 missions, the memories, the missions that really stand out in your memory.
Obviously, the first combat mission you remember always because mine was an unusual combat mission. The first one was a hooch hop. All the three of the four guys that lived in my hooch of the five guys, we were on the flight together. And I was flying with a guy who was an edgy, just in general guy, but he was a good pilot. So I was nervous and did the pre-flight, the whole thing. We launched. We're rolling down the runway. We took off individually. And when we were loaded with bombs, and we were toward the end of the runway, and a bomb fell off the airplane. And we got airborne. He yanked the nose up. The bomb slid down the runway and hit the berm. And it was not an armed bomb, so it didn't go off. So we checked each other over, made the decision, yeah, press on, let's go. So we did. We got up there. I turned the raw gear, radar homing and warning, tells you when someone's looking at you. I turned it on like I was supposed to. And not long after that, I start getting SAM indications because we were going up to the PDJ, the plane of jars. And I told the pilot, and he goes, no, don't worry about it. So then we got one from the other side. He said, don't worry about it. So then we started into the run, got the dive angle, did the whole thing, come back, pull off the target and come back. And I get the raw indications again. And my pilot tells the other airplane, okay, guys, knock it off. That's enough. They were just trying to scare me. So we had a good hop, good BDA, not great, but good. Got back, landed the airplane, rolled out, went to park it, and there was the commanding general standing there with our skipper and the group skipper. Same, I flew with both of them. And this man, he doesn't walk up to me, he walks up to my pilot. And he says, "What are you doing? Don't you know you dropped a bomb off the airplane?" And he said, "Yes, sir, we did, but everything else was safe and normal, so we pressed ahead." And he pointed his finger at him. He said, "Don't you ever do that again. You drop a bomb." Well, this guy was a very old guy. He didn't know that we didn't tell him the details. We didn't have room to stop the airplane. We had gone right into the berm with a bomb. That was the first hop. Routine hop, take off, go up to somewhere in Laos, rendezvous with the FAC. He says, I got a different one for you today, guys. Okay, give us the lineup. What's going on? He says, this is going to be a low level run, 10 degrees, which was theoretically as low as you could dive the airplane. We flew level and bomb level all the time. He said, you're going to be running straight at a cliff. He said, you see that pile of brush up there? Roger, got it. He goes, put your bombs on that. Hit that brush. Okay. So we dropped way back from the target, dropped down to about 50 feet, lit the burners, got every knot of speed we could get. Beak and I, the guy I was flying with, had worked it out. He was going to pretty much do the drop this time, but because he was very experienced. But he said, make the calls anyway. He said, you look out for SAMs. SAM 7 was you couldn't see them. They were shoulder launched, heat seeking missiles. You look out for SAMs, I'll do the bombing. Okay. So we dropped down, got every knot of speed we could. I was getting kind of worried. I said, beak. And at the same time I said, beak, he pickled and pulled. We went straight up before we hit the cliff, obviously. We over G'd the airplane, and he was the aviation maintenance officer. He's the guy you had to tell, hey, I just broke one of your airplanes. He said, geez, he said, we overstressed. He said, we got 8.5 G's on the airplane. I said, that's okay, let's press it on. Then the FAC comes up on the air and he's going crazy. He says, you blew the doors right off the cave. In that cave was an 85 millimeter gun that was on tracks, and they had covered everything. And he said, the people are coming out of there like ants. He said, go troops in contact now. Said, you hit the target. So both airplanes circled back around, made our runs, strung the bombs out. That was the first hop wherever in my BDA that I got. There were 13 KBA killed by air. Yeah.
There.
And so I remember that one. The next hop was started off routine. We pressed southeast of Nam Phong, going into Laos again. We crossed the fence, the Mekong River. That's when we turned everything on, all the raw gear, checked the switches, made sure we were ready to go. I look over at our flight lead, and he's not there. And I look down, and I see him going straight down, plan for him, just like that. And then I look, see him come back up, and I said, what's going on, lead? He goes, I got my hands full. The airplane had gone snaky on him in the air, and he was getting inputs. I said, do you have it? You got control of the airplane. He goes, I think so. I said, okay, we got the lead now. Turn back toward Thailand. And he's over there doing the best he can to keep the thing flying. And that airplane was all over the place. I tried to talk to his Rio. I looked over at him when they came by. He had his head down, which meant he was puking his guts out. Came back up, went down. I called Nam Phong, declared emergency. We escorted them back. He's over on the right doing his crazy thing with the airplane. And I thought, he's not going to be able to land this airplane unless he times it just perfect, because it was going up and down, and I mean in thousands of feet.
Wow.
So we get back, detach them. They take a long straight in, drop the gear 10 miles out, get in. The airplane is still bucking, not as much because the gear's down, the flaps are down, and he timed it perfect. He set it down right on the end of the runway, rolled out, stopped the airplane on the runway. They got out, saved them, saved the airplanes. We went up to the drop safe area up near Udorn and jettisoned our bombs. That one I will always remember.
So that in this case, the plane was just malfunctioning.
Yeah, it broke.
Yeah.
It was electronics. I was flying with a guy who's dead now. We were out of Schlitz on the airplanes. The tires were all thin. We had trouble getting parts, etc. So we fly the hop somewhere, come into Da Nang to turn around. That, in fact, that's what we call it, the Da Nang turn. Bantam set the airplane down on the end of the runway. We're rolling down, we're doing good, and we blow a tire. And the airplane starts swerving to the right. He gets it, comes back to the left. We made it to the end of the runway, stopped it right there. Crash crew came out, got the airplane, and took it in. So he said, looks like we're spending the night here. I said, okay. So parked the airplane, went to the bar, got a room at the BOQ. I'm in the BOQ, and it was my first actual night in Da Nang. So I walk up, and our warrant officer, we had an officer over there in Da Nang to handle our aircraft when they turned around and took off again. He said, you better keep your eyes open tonight. He said, Mama San's told us at 2 o'clock we're going to get hit tonight. Rockets are coming in from Rocket Ridge, not that far away from main site Da Nang. I said, okay. Yes, I was nervous, so I laid down, boots on, flight suit on, gun, whole 9 yards, and we get the alarm. So I go out, and I notice I'm the only one out there. So I jump in, go to the back of the bunker, draw my weapon, and just sit. And then I start hearing these whoop, whoop, whoop. I can feel them. I know they're nearby. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. So I get ready. Happens again. Nothing happens. So I crawl out. I go back into the BOQ. I see this same warrant officer. He said, what'd you do? I said, I went to the bunker, drew my weapon. He started laughing. I said, I heard him. Warren, his name was Warren Singer. I heard him. He goes, hey, new guy, that was us returning fire. That wasn't them. The rockets never hit us. We got hit by rockets later in Da Nang, but that wasn't the night. Got the airplane fixed, went back home.
You say in what you've written that your tour in Vietnam was the worst year of your life and the best year of your life, or I think you flip it around. You say that there was that year in Vietnam or that tour in Vietnam was the best time of my life and the worst time of my life. Why do you, what made it the best? And I think you've already described a bit of what made it the worst, but just to come at that question again, what was best about it? What was worst about it?
I was fully alive every day I was there. We didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I was alive and I had wanted very badly to live. The reason it was not good is because while I was there, my grandfather-in-law died, and I loved the man. He was a World War I veteran, and there was no way I could make it to the funeral. And I was hearing some stuff from the people that we had known before I went over about how my wife had reacted and so forth and so on. So that hurt. I had just married, had no children, but, and I have a number somewhere. I lost friends from MAG 15 while we were there. And I think about them every day. I do. And I even went to one of our reunions. I got to meet the guy I was closest to's son,
Mm.
and he never got a chance. The baby was less than 2 years old when he got shot down and killed. And so I have tried to respond appropriately to him. And then, like I told you, just last week, we find out Ron Forrester, who was an A6BN, they finally declared him killed in action. So that helps his wife and survivors out. So it's one of those things that had I known at the time that this would stay with me all my life, I'd have said, you're crazy. But you know, my dad never talked about it. He never talked about the war.
You said something a couple minutes ago that I've heard a number of times, and it's this paradox that the combat veteran often lives with. You express it very succinctly. That was the best time of my life and the worst time of my life, and what I mean by best is that's when I felt most alive. And so I'm wondering, is that because every question that comes up when you're in that plane is an important question. There's not
Yeah.
a trivial, there's nothing trivial going on. Everything is important. The intensity of it, the
Yes.
feeling of commitment to one another. Is this
Yes.
kind of stuff you're talking about when you say you just feel absolutely alive in this context?
Yeah. You hit the key word earlier, intense. It was intensity 365, 24/7. And I had lived a fairly dull life until then. I mean, I grew up around airplanes and I loved to fly. And there was even a time or two that I thought we were doing the right thing. You didn't ask, so I'll go back earlier in that. Could we have won that war? Yes, we could have. Why didn't we? We didn't hit the right targets, and we were politically hamstrung by our leaders. Okay, enough about that.
Well, I want to ask you that. I mean, I often hear about rules of engagement and um, the feeling that in one way or another, fighting forces had a hand tied behind their back. Were you given a list of targets that you are not allowed, or were you aware of targets that would have been effective targets, but you're not allowed to hit them for one reason or another?
Damn right. The harbor at Haiphong, that was off limits to us. Anywhere over China, even though I overflew it accidentally one day, we overflew it. I wasn't flying the airplane. We tried to avoid hospitals, and Vietnam had more hospitals than you can imagine if you believe the number of crosses up on the roof of the thing. They weren't always red either. But those things, yeah, we were forbidden from doing that.
So are you saying that they knew that the Americans had an understandable rule not to hit hospitals, but I'm gathering from what you're saying then is that they would have buildings that weren't actually hospitals, but they put the crosses on them
Sure,
to make you think that they were hospitals.
sure.
Yeah.
But Haiphong was the main one. We were not. You will not, period, do that.
And I imagine that's where a lot of the material from China and Russia is
Sure,
coming in.
sure. It's where the ships were. Who we were fighting over there for the unenlightened, we were not really fighting. We were fighting the North Vietnamese, of course, but we were fighting China and Russia. In 2010, I write for a newspaper, my hometown newspaper, and I write anyway. And a friend of mine in Montana said, "Hey, you want to go to Afghanistan?" And I said, "What are we going to do?" Well, I was the military guy for a U.S. senator at that time.
Mm.
He said, "We're going to go see him over there." Well, it was Max Baucus, is who it was.
Mm.
I said, "Okay." So I called the paper and I said, "Get me a media credential and I will write 14, 15 stories for my hometown newspaper. So I went over there, got the State Department brief coming in, and they said, okay, yeah, you're a colonel and you're a Vietnam vet. But he goes, the State Department guy, to his credit, he says, this is their war. Don't talk about your war. I said, Roger that, I got it. So we landed at every base except Helmand while we were over there. And Preston, every time we stopped and got off our chopper, there was a group of former Marines, including at least one Vietnam vet who got there after I did. And that's all they wanted to talk about was Vietnam. But I tried to discourage it. And I told him, I said, this is your war. This is not, this is for you guys, not me, not anything else. So that was an interesting angle.
Did they want to ask you about Vietnam because they felt like there were some similarities between what they were experiencing and what you experienced?
Yes. I said, here's another war we're not going to win. That was the general, and one or two questions. We really don't know why we're here any more than we did when we were over there. And I crudely reminded them, you're here because you work for the government. The government ordered you to be here. That's why you're here. So do your job.
This was in 2010?
Yes.
So 2010, and you're saying that folks you're speaking with on the ground over there, the war didn't make sense to them any more than Vietnam made sense to guys in 1969, 1970.
You're right.
What was your perception of the war in Afghanistan at that time?
I went over there with a completely open mind, tried to, because I wanted to know the truth, because I never knew the truth about Vietnam till years and years and years later. And I wanted to see for myself if we were doing that good a job, because there was a whole lot more infrastructure work for the Afghanis than was ever done in Vietnam. Obviously, I don't know what was done in South Vietnam. I only went there once, but I was taken, and something I remember was way out in the country. I can't remember which place we were. I was with a captain, and he said, I want to show you this. So we drive out there in the Jeep, and they had set up a dispensary, an infirmary, and there was a line a mile long of people, and there was a little boy who was crippled, obviously. And I went over and I just shook his hand, and then it was time for them to go in. And we saw, I've lost track of the number of water wells we saw drilled. I lost track of pavement and gravel roads that we had done. And I came back with the opinion that, yeah, it's a weird war, but we are doing some good.
Sort of the hearts and minds stuff. So in 2010, you felt like maybe Afghanistan would work out?
I didn't know, because after a guy named we had an ally over there up in the north part of the country. Give me a minute and I'll think of his name. I don't know, I'm not going to guess, Mahmoud maybe. The Lion of Panjshir was his nickname. And once he was dead, they killed him. His own people killed him. Once he was dead, and this was after I was back, I thought, well, there goes all the rest of them are corrupt, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But things were not at that point then. And it looked about 50-50 for us. And then, of course, the end happened.